Welcome back to Ravenous Babble. My name is Dan, and today I'll be babbling on about predictions and speculation for Heavy Hitters, the next set coming for Flesh and Blood. This weekend is the World Championships for 2023, so I thought now would be a good time to talk about the cards we've seen so far for Heavy Hitters, to try and predict what the set could bring, to speculate on mechanics, to really just talk about the set before we more than likely get more information this weekend. First up, a little bit of information about Heavy Hitters. Heavy Hitters will have its world premiere at Calling Queenstown in New Zealand on January 19th to 21st of 2024, with its set release being February 2nd of 2024, which, fun fact, is the day before my birthday. So if y'all want to give me a birthday present, I wouldn't say no to a pack of Heavy Hitters. But let's get into the cards. So we received 3 cards and 1 token with the article that announced Heavy Hitters. Runner, Double Down, and Talk a Big Game. On these cards you can see the Brute, Guardian, and Warrior classes featured in a way that is familiar to us, yet different. Now I say familiar because Outsiders featured hybrid cards for the first time. But in that set, we only received Assassin hybrid cards. We had Assassin Ninja cards and Assassin Ranger cards, but there were no Ninja Ranger cards present in the set. Now that may have been for design reasons. Maybe they couldn't find a good theme to include for those cards, or maybe they just wanted to expand the Assassin pool while also introducing new cards for Ranger and Ninja. Regardless, in this set, we finally get a full cycle of hybrid cards. So Runner is a 2-cost red pitch Brute Warrior action attack. It attacks for 6, it blocks for 3, and it reads, when this attacks, if it has Go Again, create an agility token. Now an agility token is a generic token aura that reads, at the start of your turn, destroy this, then your next attack this turn gets Go Again. Now this looks for any attack, an attack action card, a weapon attack, any attack, but it's looking for the first attack you do on a turn. Unlike Quicken, which looks for the next attack that you're doing on the turn that you have the Quicken. So while this card is very similar to Quicken, it's definitely different enough for what it brings to the table. The fact that Runner creates an agility token if it already has Go Again makes me think that the theme for Brute and Warrior might be momentum based, meaning once you get going, it's really hard for your opponent to stop you. Getting momentum and just swinging heavy attack after heavy attack after heavy attack, it might be hard to get started, but it also might be hard to stop once it does get started. Also, can we talk about the art? This is both brutal and beautiful at the same time. The use of the circular slice with the blood following the path of the axe, cutting through what looks to be 3 different enemies at once, it's just a really cool scene. And definitely gets me hyped for the possibility of maybe some axes in the next set, or at least axe support, hopefully, because I feel like we're right on the cusp of axes being really useful, and I think just one more push and they might become like a mainstay. Double Down is a 2-cost red pitch Guardian Warrior action. It blocks for 3, and it reads, you may destroy a gold you control rather than pay Double Down's resource cost. The next attack that wagers this turn gains +3 attack and overpower. If a hero would create 1 or more tokens from a wager this turn, instead they create that many +1 of each of those tokens. Go Again. Now if you are, for whatever reason, unfamiliar with what a gold token is a generic token item that reads, action for 2 resources, destroy gold, draw a card, go again. Of the currency cycle, gold, silver, and copper, it is currently the best, if you're not including diamond, which currently has no legal functionality in the classic constructed, blitz, and living legend formats. Now if you take a look at this card again, you can see that wagers and overpower are both in bold, and that's because overpower and now wager are both keywords. They're both mechanics. What we don't know here is what wager does. That's something I want to take a stab at. I think when you wager, you're wagering if an attack is going to hit, right? Which I think gives more purpose to this +3 and overpower because you're more likely to hit. Now, if you do hit with a wagered attack, I think you make a gold. But if you don't hit with a wagered attack, I think your opponent gets to make a gold. And I think that plays into the whole destroy a gold rather than paying Double Down's resource cost to actually play this card. Talk a Big Game is the third card that was revealed. It's a 0-cost blue pitch, Brute Guardian action that blocks for 3, and it reads, choose a number. The next time you deal that much or more attack damage to a hero this turn, create that many might tokens. Go again. Now, if you missed out on the Round the Table product, where the might tokens were introduced, the might tokens are a generic token aura that read, at the start of your turn, destroy this, then your next attack this turn gets +1 attack. It seems like it'd be a little hard to pull off, but I think there are definitely some avenues where it makes sense, specifically with these two classes that can use it, the dominate aspect of it, or overpower. You might be able to predict how much damage you can do, at least, and that could prove to be very beneficial down the road, adding more damage on your next turn. The benefit to this is that it's a blue block 3, which is huge for both of those classes, especially Guardian. With gold being mentioned on Double Down, that also brings up the question, are we going to see maybe some royal support, perhaps? You know, who's watching over these arena games, right? We could see something on the expansion list that deals in royal. And speaking of the expansion list, there are two very specific things that I would love to see in heavy hitters on the expansion list, and that's Command & Conquer and Glistening Steelblade. Command & Conquer because we've been seeing that LSS acknowledges how expensive some of the cards are in the game, specifically the staples, and we've been seeing that they're willing to reprint them when it's necessary. We saw Crown of Providence and Dusk Till Dawn, immediately followed by Fyendal Spring Tunic and Bright Lights, and I think we're gonna have an immediate follow-up again with Command & Conquer and heavy hitters. I could be wrong, but it seems like it'd be on theme for powerful attacks. And I've said it before that I think we'll see Command & Conquer reprinted within 2 sets of Bright Lights. So if it's not heavy hitters, I think it'll be the next one. Now, will this trend continue with things like Enlightened Strike or Art of War? TBD, but I don't believe those are at a price that it warrants them being reprinted just yet. Now, kind of contradicting myself immediately, Glistening Steelblade is around the same price. The difference here is that Glistening Steelblade is only available in a product that MSRPs for $50. So really, in essence, you could argue that Glistening Steelblade costs $50. Now, you can find those decks for cheaper and you can buy the singles, so there's always a way around it. But there's also the other fact that Glistening Steelblade only comes in non-foil, which generally isn't an issue because most pro players will be playing with non-foils, as foils tend to warp depending on how they're taken care of. Me, on the opposite end of that spectrum, has a completely foiled Dory deck, except for 3 cards, and that's the 3 Glistening Steelblades. So, you can see why I would love to have a rainbow foil Glistening Steelblade, and I think that this would be a good opportunity for them to reprint it, especially now that Rhinar vs. Dorinthia is getting a little old. So, with a set coming out that supports Brute and Warrior, someone might want to get into Dorinthia, and they might have to go back and try and get Glistening Steelblade, and it might be a little difficult considering how you get them. So, would we be lucky enough to see 2 reprints on the expansion list for this set? I don't know. But it also feels like I've been saying Glistening Steelblade is going to get reprinted for the last few sets, and it hasn't. So, if I had to pick one of these 2 to more than likely get reprinted in this next set, I think I'm going to go with Command & Conquer. It being an average of $75 for a copy when you would want 2 to 3 in a deck that runs it, yeah. You can see why that might be a bit of a deterrent for new players. Now, earlier this year, Fyendal Spring Tunic was $150, $200, and Crown of Providence was $150, $180. Those are both around $70 now. That is a significant drop in the cost of entry to Flesh and Blood. But the other card that stands up there with those is Command and Conquer, and unlike those, you need 3 for your collection. So it makes sense for them to reprint Command and Conquer sooner rather than later. The Fabled reprint, I've said it before, I'll say it again, don't really count it as a reprint. I more so count it as a Marvel variant, because it didn't do anything to the actual population of Command and Conquer, the actual demand. Now, cards like Enlightened Strike and Art of War, I think they'll have their time in the sun. They will need to be reprinted at some point. But when you have other Majestic cards that are even more expensive, that are just in one class or 2 classes, we have Tome of the Imperial Flame at 35 right now. We have Codex of Frailty at 55 right now. I think maybe actually 60 or 65. It's pretty high. You have Twin Drive at 35 right now. Previously mentioned Glistening Steelblade at 30. There are quite a few in-class cards that are in the 30 to 50 range now. And I think that's healthy for the game, that's healthy for the secondary market. But it's only a matter of time before generic cards like Enlightened Strike and Art of War get up to where Command and Conquer is right now. So I think it's important to hit Command and Conquer now and be ready for those 2 when their time comes. Now what about the Fabled of the set? We have a Guardian Fabled already. So I would hope to see maybe a hybrid Fabled, like Outsiders, and it maybe be Warrior and Brute. That being said, when Dusk Till Dawn came out, I was expecting a Shadow Fabled, but we got another Light Fabled. I was expecting that Shadow Fabled because we had already had a Light Fabled. Well, we already have a Guardian Fabled, so honestly, with the current precedent, the next Fabled could be anything. It could literally just be Guardian. It could be the first tri-class Fabled. It could be all 3 of them. It could just be Brute, maybe to make up for the lack of Shadow Fabled for Leviathan players. It could be a Warrior Fabled, it could be anything. The one thing I would wholeheartedly say it's not going to be is generic, because generic Fabled cards have proven to be the most powerful, they've proven to be the most used, and they've also proven themselves to be the most expensive. Given they are the oldest, but there's also only 2, so it's kind of hard to compare those to something that's newer. Something else to hit on is that we haven't seen a landmark Fabled since Tales of Aria. I thought that we would get one in Dynasty with the Throne Room. I thought we would get one with Outsiders with Blackjack's Tavern. I even thought we would get one in Dusk Till Dawn with the Gateway to Arathiel. None of those sets had landmarks. So I don't know if they're just saving the landmark card type for when it's very appropriate, or if they've kind of given up on it. The Great Library of Solana proved to be very powerful. It's proving to be very powerful right now in the current Prism build. And Corsham, Crossroad of the Elements, has fallen flat, more or less. It's about $70 right now. There's always been speculation on that card for the possible PvE format in the future, but with them coming out and saying that they need more time for PvE, that card has gone down even more. So I don't know how many hopes and dreams are left alive for that card being good in that format, because we also don't even know if it would have a lot of application in that format. Point I'm getting at, this is another set that presents an opportunity for a good landmark card in that of an arena, considering this feels like it's kind of be like gladiatorial games, so why not have some sort of arena landmark to represent that? If not, it's probably going to be a gem. That's usually how it goes. But I would like to see them revisit the landmark card type. Now, what's something I want to see in this set? I think that it would be really interesting if we had hybrid weapons. One of my biggest things with Flesh and Blood right now is that I don't think heroes have enough diversity when it comes to their weapon selection. I think we have a decent amount when it comes to armor, given some pieces shine more than others, but I think we could use more weapons. Some classes have more than others, but when you look at things like Ninja has Kodachis, which are very frequently used. Fi has Searing Emberblade. And then you have stuff like Zephyr Needle, which outside niche or like gimmick strategies doesn't really see play. Kind of sort of the same thing for Edge of Autumn. People look at Edge of Autumn and they say, why would I use this? I have seen one Katsu player, or was it a Fi player? I don't know. I think it was a Fi player that used Edge of Autumn in an Icelander heavy meta. I believe it was Road to Nationals earlier this year. If not, then it was the last Pro Quest. I can't really remember. But it was interesting seeing that because, you know, maybe against Icelander you're going to be taxed so much that you're not going to be able to swing your Kodachis as often. Or maybe your Searing Emberblade is going to cost too much. But you want to be able to kind of continue the chain. You want to be able to either build up for Salt the Wound, or maybe you want to try and stick the Mask Momentum trigger easier. And that one resource for one with Go Again, just straight up, is actually pretty good in that matchup. There might even be a weird situation where you just want to swing one Kodachi just to keep going, but maybe you don't have an efficient pitch. Maybe your only pitch in your hand that's decent is an Art of War. I've had that a few times too, and your Kodachi won't have Go Again. So I think the Edge of Autumn does have some niche uses. Honestly, I think more so than Zephyr Needle, but Zephyr Needle has even proven pretty good recently into Dromai. It feels a little bit more like a win more card in that strategy, but there's some application. If we're being honest, we really only see things like Searing Emberblade and Harmonized Kodachis, and I would like to see that get mixed up a bit, especially with Kodachi, because that and Zephyr Needle are one-handed. You can combine them, you can mix and match, and while something like Assassin, which thematically makes sense that they have the right tool for the job, has 4 different daggers that they can mess with, Ninja only has 2, I guess, if you want to mix and match those. But like I said, Zephyr Needle is super niche and like pretty easy to destroy if we're being honest. And I wouldn't even consider running it unless I was doing some strange Concealed Blade build or just playing it into Dromai. That being said, that pretty much just leaves Kodachi if you're going to be dual wielding, and I would like to see that mixed up a bit. It's obviously not going to happen in this set because this is a Brute, Guardian, and Warrior set, but there could be generic weapons. Though, I don't think there will be because the only generic weapon we have so far is Talishar, and Talishar does have its place. It's definitely had its time in the sun, but it being the only generic weapon I think is telling. I think they might be a little adverse to making something like a one-handed generic weapon for what it could possibly do. I think they could figure it out for sure, and I'd love to have maybe like a heavier hitting weapon for Assassin as like an offhand for when I feel like I can stick some damage through or something, and maybe it has rust counters just like Talishar. There's definitely design space for generic weapons, both one-handed and two-handed, and I'm sure we'll see more in the future. But for this set, like I said, I would love to see a high diversity of weapons, and I think hybrid weapons would be a good place for that. Now how we go about that, it could be pretty standard, just token weapons or high rarity weapons, that's fine. But we could get creative with it too. They could all have rust counters, the same mechanic as Talishar, and maybe you can equip them from your inventory. Maybe that's part of the card text, you know, at the start of your turn or something like that. Maybe you can equip them from your inventory for gold or for silver or copper, some kind of currency. Maybe you buy the equipment, similar to Assassin, except you would buy it from your inventory as opposed to just the graveyard. Maybe they could go in your deck, similar to Evos in Bright Lights. Except that, for me, that feels strange because Evos are armor, it makes sense that they block, it makes sense that you can block with them as their action card form. Weapons, not so much. Yeah, they could parry, but it doesn't feel right. You could take away the block feature of them. We all know that Brute has plenty of cards that don't block. Point being, I would love to see something really creative done with weapons, at least hybrid weapons, and at least more than 3 weapons in the set. You know, I don't just want to see the token weapons. And on that note of diversity, I would love to see something that's not a hammer that Guardian could use, you know? Maybe Brute needs a big axe. You know, Warrior has a few of them, and they only really use one. And for Warrior, maybe Warrior needs a hammer. You know, mix up the narrative. And I feel like that's where hybrid weapons could really come into play and be flavorful here, because you could still give those weapon types to the class that would normally get them, but you could share them with a class that doesn't. And bonus points if I get a spear for Yoji, because damn, I still feel gypped on that. I almost put money on the fact that we weren't going to get a wrench for Max, because we didn't get a spear for Yoji, we didn't get a sword for Emperor, and we, biggest of all, the biggest cop-out, we didn't get an anchor for Riptide. Come on, man. And I've heard murmurings of a Talishar Riptide now, so come on. We couldn't have had an anchor, just a melee ranger variant. I feel like it could have worked. Something else I want to bring up is how many heroes we're going to get in this set. With so many similarities to Outsiders so far, I'm really wondering if we're going to get 6 heroes again. 6 young heroes, that is. Because it was great for Outsiders Limited. You had options, you know? You could draft into a certain class and maybe you have to pivot within the class. Like, it was really fun. And after Bright Lights, which is a fun, limited environment, but it leaves something to be desired. You don't really have as much incentive to go into one hero or one class or another. Well, not even a class because there's only one, but one hero or another. You also don't have much control over it, especially considering most players, if they're going to go for the win, they're probably just going to draft Fatigue Tekla Vossen. So, really cool idea, really fun for 3-pack crack, even though it usually ends up being a max format. But I would love to see some diversity when it comes to heroes. 2 for each class was really cool in Outsiders. I really love drafting Outsiders, and honestly I wish I had more time to draft it, but we got pushed into Monarch pretty quickly if you ask me. And a lot of us had already drafted Monarch, so it was a fun callback kinda. It was a little nostalgic, but I really just wanted to go back and draft more Outsiders if I'm being totally honest. So hopefully we see some hero options when it comes to the draft environment, and I know for sure that people are really hoping for at least one specific hero to make an appearance, and that's Kasai. People are really hoping for an adult Kasai. Now, adult Kasai is probably going to have a different ability, and I don't know if it's going to be exactly what people want, but this set might set Warrior up, or at least the Warrior in this set, to be more based on actual attack actions as opposed to weapon attacks. At least that's the vibe I'm getting from Runner, or that might be the hybrid theme for those classes. If you're a fan of Kasai and she is in the set, don't be surprised if she plays totally different from what she did before. There might still be a similar theme, and that theme might be copper, so there's still functionality with her specialization and whatnot, but I don't know that I would fully expect her to have the same ability or even a similar ability. We'll see. I do hope that Kasai is in the set. I know it's something that people have been wanting real bad. But yeah, time will tell, and honestly I think we're probably going to get at least one card revealed this weekend at Worlds. So hopefully I get this video out before that. And maybe my guess on Wager is correct. Maybe we also get hybrid weapons. You know, maybe it's something completely different and we're all just surprised and excited. Anyways, don't forget to tune in this weekend for Worlds. It's going to be great. This meta's kind of wild, I'm not going to lie. And it should be a good time. Plus, maybe we'll get some Living Legend stream action on Sunday. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Speaking of which, the next Babbling On will be about the Living Legend system and the Living Legend format. 2 topics that people have been pretty vocal about recently, especially on Twitter. So I want to just put my 2 cents out there, but I want to do it after the Worlds weekend, because if we do get footage from Living Legend or we get some feedback from the Living Legend format, I want to be able to include that in the video as well. So until then, stay safe, keep playing great games, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya. Shout out to the Ravenous Babble patrons who keep the channel going. If you would like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/RavenousBabble and see which tier is best suited for you.